Hi everyone, it's Jerry. This is game 5 from the 2023 World Chess Championship match. Nepomniachtchi has the white pieces in this one, and we are level 2-2. Let's have a look. Opening wise, it's another Ruy Lopez. We follow game 1 of this match, where Nepomniachtchi had the white pieces in game 1. We follow that game until move 6. Nepomniachtchi deviates with d3. In game 1, we saw the delayed exchange variation, bishop takes knight. There will be no minor piece imbalance at this moment. d3 on board, b5, bishop b3. Now that this pawn is secure, black is ready to hunt the bishop. There's no fear of knight takes e5 anymore. So a square is produced with c3, ready to back off to c2 in case of knight a5. And also, white is prepared to maybe expand, even though it is coming at even though it takes the d pawn a second step to get there, second move. From here, castles, h3, cutting out any bishop g4. Black says, fine, I can't go there anymore. Now, I'll make a commitment with my bishop. Only after you've invested this tempo will I make the decision to go on the long diagonal. Okay. From here it's a4. Very common. Rook pawns like to attack knight pawns. For as long as this tension remains, I think white benefits. White is in control. White gets to decide when the A file opens up, when this rook will be activated. From here, knight a5, not just to throw a punch to the bishop, but the c-pawn is now free to contribute. We have this on move 11. So this guy has an eye on d4, b4. There could be a b4 push, or even a c4 push. There's a lot of options with this pawn duo created. A lot of positives regarding pawn breaks. Is there a negative? There is. The negative is that a hole has now been created on d5. This is what prompts white's next move, bishop g5. He's looking to track down pieces that can maybe knock out a white piece that's on d5. So this is a primary, this was a primary defender of d5. So he's hinting at giving up the dark square bishop, the good bishop, for a knight, because he has an eye on that d5 square. h6 on board, and sure enough, we do have this bishop for knight exchange. White is clearly keying in on d5. Now, this is not the only option for black. Black could consider here a move like knight to d7, and this offers a dark square bishop exchange. This is a way to go. A different way we can have, we can have a different minor piece exchange. What would be happening here? This would be the good bishop being exchanged for the bad bishop. And this knight could look to come back to f6 to fight for the d5 square. Maybe even look to push with d5. This is not a path we go down. Instead, he simply questions the bishop. So bishop pair for black, unopposed dark square bishop. How will this guy become activated? Let's see. First, a takes b, a takes b, knight d2. I think this exchange is flicked in right now. White wants to have this file opened up. If you don't open it up straight away, let's say if you play knight b to d2, black could consider b4, and now this rook doesn't have as much breathing space. So white makes sure that this captures in right now, and only then brings the knight out. From here, knight c6, mission accomplished. The knight went here primarily to get out of the c-pawn's way. It just happened to be threatening the bishop, but the primary function was to get the c-pawn rolling. We got that. Now let's get back in the ballgame. He's on c6 more central. d5 is available. He hops right to it. Rooks are exchanged. Queen d7. This knight was, in a way, pinned, so the bishop is now defended by the queen. The knight is free to move, and the rook is also ready to roll on the only opened file. Rook to e1, rook a8, queen d1. I'd like you to take note of the clock times. These, in many of the games, the clocks are really telling a story. It's not a glitch that you're seeing here. Nepomniachtchi has spent under 2 minutes on the first 19 moves. So it is as if Liren is playing against Stockfish up until this point. I mean, Nepomniachtchi is still in prep. He's averaging like a move every, 5, 6, 7 seconds. He's playing really fast, so when is he going to be on his own? When is his first think? Let's see. Liren comes up with this idea to reroute the bishop. It really isn't doing a whole lot on f6. It's not the only way. I mean, there are approaches here for black where you could keep this bishop around to safeguard your king. A healthy move is almost always going to be g6. You keep your dark square bishop around to watch over the weaknesses on h6 and f6. Maybe even in some cases you can play h5, but g6 is a healthy move in this position. You could keep the bishop around on f6, but he looks to reroute it. He has an eye on this diagonal opposite the white king. It's going to take some work before its eyes are opened up, but this is the intention, to get to b6 and play c4. All right, from here it's knight to f1. Queen knight going on this typical journey, eyeing up e3 or g3, mainly e3 because of that weakened d5 square. Knight e7, light square bishops come off. Knight e3, bishop b6, h4. So this is a really big moment in the game. Interesting decision. What is this move looking to do? It's looking to cramp black's kingside structure. If it could be established on h5, it is, as Nepomniachtchi said in the press conference, he felt that it would be beneficial in many endgames. I'm paraphrasing, but he thought it was a nice positive to establish a pawn on h5. It does fix a pawn on a dark square. It makes it difficult for black to play g6. This would not be a good idea to play g6 once this pawn is already on h5. You're going to end up weakening your 7th rank, for example. Let me just make a passing move to highlight. If you're ever playing g6 in this scenario, if you take with the knight, this is terrible. Your pawns are split. There's a big weakness on f5. And if you're taking with the pawn, we still have 2 major pieces around. And you have just weakened your 7th rank. A pawn on f7 is an important defender for your king. Defends the 7th rank very well, but now that it's on g6, you are now vulnerable. So this has a great cramping effect, we might say, on black's position. A white pawn established on h5. It may act in many cases as a catalyst for an attack. Okay. From here, queen c6. So black has already invested a couple tempi rerouting the bishop. Next up, he wants to play c4, but playing c4 right away to open up this guy's eyes will drop a pawn. c4 can be met with the capture, and there's a problem on d6. So, queen c6, providing some support of d6, supporting c4 as well. And from here, h5. I should mention Also that if black attempts to stop this pawn from being planted in his house, there's an issue with that. The move I'm talking about is black playing h5. I should note that g6 is not stopping this advance. This will be played like in an instant. There's no fear of, oh, I'm going to lose a pawn. This would be a disaster for black. Okay, this is a winning position for white. We look at these squares. f5 is enormous. A knight on that square. We saw that in game 4, a white knight on f5. Same story here. It would be a monster. Okay, so this would not be a way to stop h5, nor would h5 by black. Let's see why. It's because white could follow up with knight g5. This guy is hit. How do you defend it? g6. Queen f3. This guy is hit. How do you defend it? Let's say rook f8. And now in comes g4. White is winning. The king side is getting broken down. These two are queenside committed. This is a disaster for black. Look at these knights. Look at the queens. We're ready to give mate in 2. Okay. Just want to give you an idea of how white can quickly break down black's kingside structure if he plays h5. In this game, it's queen c6. From here, h5, c4, d4. Not allowing this bishop to knock out the knight. Some pressure is mounting against e5. Black gives up his e5 pawn. Knight takes. And queen to c5. So she's still patrolling this 5th rank. The computer's pointing out one of the better moves is to stay trained on e4 and be there to indirectly defend b5, right? The b5 pawn is poison in this position because of bishop takes e3, unleashing this attack. Okay, no queen to b7. She moves forward. She has an eye on this pawn. It's defended for now, but she's patrolling that 5th rank. Queen g4. There's queen g4, queen f3. Computer saying this is a tick better. Queen f3 observing the rook with an eye on some e5 break. Some line is being pointed out where after rook to e8, there's now queen g4, some little finesse here with a pit stop. Queen takes a pit stop on f3 and then goes to g4 in this line with an eye on with an eye on the d7 square to be disruptive to the rook. Further, okay, in this game it's queen g4 straight away. Now, a queen on g4 and a knight on f5 are a great, well, it's a great force, a great attacking force. So black has to be very careful. If that is established, there's not only the threat of queen takes g7, but also knight takes h6, taking advantage of the pinned g-pawn. So proceed with caution. From here, queen e5, that is considered the best move. Knight f3. Black offers a queen exchange. It's declined. The knight hops into f5. Knight takes knight. And pawn takes. So the queens are maintained right around, this point in the game. White should feel, white has the safer king. This pawn has a cramping effect on black's kingside. There's this one piece opposite the king, but it at the moment is not tied in with any other black piece. White is the one who should be keeping queens on board. So we have the pawn capture. The rook is also helped with this. It's on an open file all of a sudden. Now, an alternative to the capture on f5 is queen to f6. This is a note that Liren made in the press conference. Instead of capturing the knight, you could play to f6 straight away. This is defending against the mate threat on g7, and it holds the key squares from this post. Defends the knight, defends g7. All right. In the game, it's knight takes knight, pawn takes. It's roughly an equalish position. Queen f6. So this is where it starts to go a little astray for black. The placement of the queen on f6. The queen is on f6, but she isn't really functioning as if she is a queen. She's more like a bishop, and she's really under control by this knight alone. So it's a bit awkward to be positioned on this f6 square. One of the better moves in this position is to drop the queen to d7. Staying opposite the queen, keeping an eye out for the f6 break. This pawn is still pinned. f6 would drop the queen. And the idea, the nice idea with queen d7 is that it's the bishop who will now be able to transfer to f6. And from f6, it will be golden. It will stop the f6 pawn break and also observe the queenside pawns. It will allow black to follow up with b6, and you could try to break down that the queenside structure in that way. It stops all sorts of pawn breaks and enables a pawn break. Okay. In this game, it's queen to f6. From here, queen e4. The rook is hit. Rook to b8. In this game, I was sort of reminded of the AlphaZero versus Stockfish games, where we end up getting to positions. What we saw in those games were positions where AlphaZero would get a position where you could improve continually, little by little, and Stockfish was like just shuffling back and forth, making passing moves almost. And that is what black is slowly, that's the type of position black is slowly slipping into. One where you just have to move back and forth. There's not really a great way to make improvements. He's on his back foot. White is for choice in this position. From here we have rook to e2. So this is one that I found instructive, this 32nd move by Nepomniachtchi. Right around here, I was drawn to small improvements. As an example, g3 was on my mind with the idea to play king g2. It's a small improvement. You're off the back rank. You don't have to worry about pawn race scenarios where black now promotes with check. If the king's on g2, you're on a light square. This guy isn't going to hurt you. Okay, these are small improvements. g3, king g2. Great. The issue with this, however, is that black would be able to play b4. g3 does not take into account the b4 pawn break. If c takes b, there's queen takes b. Do we see the point now behind rook e2? It's to defend against this pawn break. b4 we could take, and there is no queen takes b2. Okay, now that we have b2 covered, we can think more about improving with our g-pawn, maybe our king. Okay, black follows with bishop to c5. It's now on a more useful square, a connected square. I think these guys are well coordinated. This bishop, by the way, it's optically good. I think it may look good, but objectively it's not really doing a whole lot unless black could somehow coordinate on f2 Can he tie in another piece on the f2 square? If not, this guy is sort of like staring off into space. He's not functioning very well. Okay, it's a deceptive piece. It looks like it may be a best piece, but it's really not, unless black could coordinate somehow with it. Okay, in the game, we don't have g3. g4. White squeezes a little bit more out of the g-pawn. Opens up a new square for the king, and also there is now a possibility for a pawn break with g5. Okay, from here, queen to d8. I have to highlight an interesting variation, and it's going to involve a bunch of shuffling moves for black, but this is a big intersection square. There are some interesting ideas that can surface with this grip over g6. So I'd like to highlight this. Let's just say we have the rook moving back and forth. This is, by the way, not far off from what ends up happening in the game. The rook ends up doing a lot of shuffling, but let me put these moves on to show you a pretty neat idea. Okay, I know I just shuffled there for black, but here we go. Now that everything is set up, our knight is supported, here we go. We have these ideas all of a sudden, and this knight gets to drop in to g6. This guy is all in the forward. It is not around at all to defend the dark squares in black's camp. Not that that would help with this sequence of moves, but this is a deceptive piece. It's not really out of play. And how do you stop mate here? You'd have to take the knight. And then you would have to give up the queen. And in the end, white is up the exchange. Okay, it's just something to key in on. This square should still grab your attention, even though a pawn is watching over it. Sinking some piece into that square can show up. There's even situations, I could show another one, where let's say this rook is over here, off the back rank. We could see ideas where you give a check and then drop the queen in there. Pawn takes queen, so what? Okay, you're getting this. I'm not saying this is the best variation. This is apparently winning for black, but the idea, dropping some piece into this big intersection square on g6. Okay, in the game it's g4, queen d8. That was setting up d5. White says, no, you will not play d5. Black does have a majority, but he sniffs that one right out, does not even give him a chance to get it rolling. The queen is slightly improved. There's a pin against the pawn. King f8. King f1 off of this diagonal. And, I mean, this one caught me off guard. I was thinking you step up, but he's hanging a left. He's getting off of this diagonal, and he's maybe not so quick to be on the same diagonal as the queen. White would prefer to keep the queens on. He's the aggressor in this position. Every white piece is better than the black pieces in this position. So if you're going to g2, there may be one day the offer of a queen exchange, queen b7 move at some point. So he's staying off of g2 for right now. From here, rook c8. Tough to recommend a move for black. Rook e4 with the nigh on maybe taking on c4 if b4 is in there, but there's also another idea. Liren does not have a lot of time, about 11 minutes now, still has to make move 40 to get an additional hour. In comes g5. There's only one good move here for black, and even this move is, I don't know, it's very computer-like. There's some deep line. The best move in reply to g5 is queen d7, allowing white to take on h6 like this, and follow up with knight to d4, some queen b7, knight c6. It gets very some lengthy line like this. Computer says, white is slightly better from this point. Not a super logical line at all. White's in a spot to meet queen e6 with knight to e7 in this position. Okay, this is apparently best play for black, kicking off with queen d7 in reply to g5. That was not played. A good 7 minutes was spent with Ding Liren's next move. He ends up capturing on g5. And now comes rook g4. This guy is hit. What do we do about that? I misspoke. Not 7 minutes was spent. 7 minutes was spent at this moment right here after rook to g4. He ends up picking rook to a8. What's the problem with defending the pawn with the pawn? Can you spot the winning move for white? Feel free to pause the video. Okay, the winning move is knight h4. This is a really beautiful sequence. Rook e4, g5, rook g4, and after f6, he has it calculated that knight to h4 is winning. He's ready to hop into g6. Check, flushing the king to the e-file. He's going hunting with the queen, with the rook on the e-file. And if you take the knight, h-pawn, this guy is worth far more than a pawn. This is broken. Queen, rook, pawn. Black is on his back foot. Major pieces on the 8th rank. Bishop staring off into space. Winning. This is considered a mate in 12. You take the pawn. Couple different mate in 2s. How's that one? So that is a very nice sequence. He had this worked out. f6, knight h4, crushing. In the game, it's rook a8. Black's going to try and get the queens off. We have knight takes g5, another move instead of rook to a8. If queen to f6, the knight can take on g5, and we're threatening a fork. And we're also making sure there's no queen to e5 here. There would be mate. So if queen to f6, we could take here. And if king there, we have knight to e4, looking to crash through with f6 next. Trying to get the queens off is not saving black, because we could exchange queens and win the bishop. Okay. f6 isn't working. Queen f6 is no help. What's tried is rook a8. Knight takes g5. Check. King e2 stays off of this diagonal for the moment. Queen e7. Knight e4. Looking at f6 next, and then bolting with the h-pawn. This guy is not a bother to the white pieces at all. Not an inconvenience. Easily worked around. Queen gets out of f6 with the fork. White gets out of the pin on the e-file. Queen a8. Black is getting the queens off. However, these guys are still too good. This guy is still a non-factor. f6 hits. Even without the queens on, this is crushing. So what's tried here is g6. An alternative, the capture on f6 is no help. White would be able to take on f6, threaten a skewer. How do you stop that? Let's say king e7. White could play knight g8 check and cut the rook off from observing the promotion square. How might it follow? King e6, we run. How do you stop Harry? You can't. Try to get behind? No. No stopping him. Okay. He tries g6. We exchange a bunch on g6. Rook a2. White now activates the king, gets the rook in a better position. He's ready to get to h8. There are mates right around the corner. This game goes no further. Black resigns after this 48th move. Rook h6. If play continued with, let's say, king to g8, I'll show you two variations. King g8 could be met with king f5. We're trying to sneak in here, push the pawn, get to h8, get to promotion land. Rook a2, king g6, rook a7, but now comes knight g5. We are pushing through. d5, f7, and you have to give up the rook for the pawn at this stage. Otherwise, white's going to get a queen. The bishop really isn't helping to defend the promotion. So, for example, if you went king f8, we give the check. The king is in the way. Promote. Some other line, here's the quick mate. If bishop takes pawn, we have a mate in 3. With check, king f7, and one quiet move, king f5, checkmate, next, with knight takes pawn or knight g5. Game over. So, a massive win in this match. Coming back from the rest day, Nepomniachtchi strikes right back. He is now leading again, 3-2. Okay, let's have a look at the tail of the tape on this one. And we can see that it was very level for quite a while. The decision there after knight to f5, knight takes f5, maybe queen f6, as Liren was pointing out in the press conference. And it was already difficult after this g5 move. He had to try queen d7, not at all easy to find good moves at that point. Also, his clock situation wasn't the greatest. Ended up taking on g5, and it was a goner from there at the end of the day. 96% accuracy for Nepomniachtchi, 92% for Liren. Okay, we will see what happens in game 6. Quite the match we have so far. Feel free, as usual, to leave any feedback to this video in the comment section below. I hope you enjoyed it and maybe took a thing or two away. That's all for now. Take care. Bye.